Yes, thank you for having us speak at this event. I just want to start by saying that we would like to continue this conversation. So any follow up on this is greatly appreciated. During the 2021 annual NELCO symposium, a small working group was formed to draft a document summarizing the importance of 3 critical areas of concern pertaining to electronic resources, particularly as publishers and libraries increasingly transition from print to electronic format. These critical areas are preservation, discoverability, and accessibility, or PDA, as we call them in short. The group's work resulted in a PDA toolkit, which I will provide the link to on the NELCO website in the chat. It's finding that the PDA toolkit to be of extreme importance. The NELCO Board of Directors also created an ad hoc committee to find ways to bring attention to preservation, discovery, and accessibility. One of the recommendations was to create a speakers bureau. And so today you'll be hearing from speakers from that. And today's panelists include the 5 of the members of the original PDA working group and myself. So Rebecca Bearden is the Senior Serials and Metadata Librarian at Boston University's Feynman and Pappas Law Libraries. AJ Bleckner is the Student Services Research Librarian and Instructional Designer at Harvard Law School Library. Mindy Kent is the Manager of Reference and Student Research and Instruction Services at Harvard Law School Library. Elizabeth Umbleby is the Head of Technical Services at the University of Connecticut Thomas J. Meskill Law Library, and Caroline Walters is the Collection Development Librarian for U.S. Law and Materials at Harvard Law School Library. And I am David Walker, Director of Schaefer Law Library and Associate Professor at Albany Law School. So the panelists will present, and then afterwards we're going to break into 3 different breakout rooms based on preservation, discoverability, and accessibility, and then we'll come back. But I am going to turn it over to our great speakers. So
thank you, David. Caroline and I are going to be talking to you a little bit about the preservation aspect. Basically, as we are moving into a world of electronic resources, and particularly electronic treatises, we're at a critical moment where we are at risk of losing key components of our history. As we're facing tighter budgets, changing patron expectations, and the various needs and restrictions that have arisen out of the pandemic, libraries are making the understandable and rational decision to cancel print and to rely on electronic versions of classic legal treatises. About 10 years ago, we at Harvard Law School and many other research libraries were forced to cancel many print treatises that we deemed reliably available on Westlaw and Lexis. This happened because even well-funded libraries can't keep up with the steep cost of print. The problem is that these works are not actually reliably available online if the publishers don't keep earlier editions online. And as library demand shifts, publishers are moving away from print-oriented production, often abandoning discrete editions in favor of continually updating resources. But without access to these older editions, we're losing a key link to understanding changes in the law. Now, at first glance, this seems like it's mainly a problem for academic law schools, and certainly the potential problem is most visible in an academic setting. I can think of a number of scholars working and teaching in legal history who rely on earlier editions to inform their teaching and their scholarship. As an example, one of our faculty members keeps multiple editions of Scott on trusts in his office when he's teaching in order to be able to easily demonstrate changes in the understanding of the law. Other scholars and students are using historical treatises to trace the evolution of legal terms or concepts, or to do text mining projects. But this isn't just a question of distant history and esoteric scholarship. The loss is most severe in the past few years as we've moved towards electronic editions. As a research librarian, when I teach 1Ls how to do legal research, I often emphasize secondary sources and legal treatises in particular as the most efficient gateway to understanding the law at a particular moment in time. But a historian researching the law 50 years ago is going to have an easier entry into their research than someone who's trying to understand the law as it was 5 years ago. So Caroline, who are the stakeholders and why?
Hello, everybody. So as Mindy mentions, this is a problem for all law libraries, not just academic research libraries. Before I worked at Harvard, I worked in a more typical academic library where the concept of buying and then keeping previous editions was not a common practice. Like most law libraries, we didn't have the space or budget for that kind of collecting. But here at Harvard, it is the distinct mission of a research library to collect in this manner. If older editions are not on the platforms and Harvard and Yale don't have them, who will? How will academic libraries and firm libraries who rely on our deep historical collections support their own scholarly research or citation needs through interlibrary loan? Clearly, the loss of this content has broad implications that affect all academic libraries as well as firm and court libraries. For an example, a judge trying to follow up on a treatise cited in an opinion from 2013 may not be able to find the cited edition. A lawyer trying to impeach an expert witness with writings from the 2008 edition of the witness's own book published electronically might be out of luck. Finally, publishers themselves are stakeholders. For one, they are, like librarians, stewards of legal history. Moreover, they are literally sitting on a wealth of data and potential future revenue streams for archived materials, both for text data mining opportunities and for scholarly research and citation needs.
So Caroline, what can we do? What's the call to action?
For one, we can all talk about this a lot. We need all voices to raise awareness whenever and wherever possible. One of the PDA Toolkit goals was to make it easy for librarians to remember the issues at stake. We need to tell the vendors repeatedly that this is important and matters to all libraries, including court, firm, and academic libraries. The toolkit will give you talking points for vendors and suggested questions such as, if the vendor publishes titles in discrete editions, can they keep the previous editions on their platforms? Or if the vendor is no longer creating editions, can they allow version tracking or track changes? And questions to ask ourselves include, could we consider Hein as an archival partner, or PalmPrint, or another discoverable, accessible repository or archive? Over the years, we've made little progress despite many individual conversations with publishers. AALL's Committee on Relations with Information Vendors, CRIV, twice dedicated their roundtable sessions on this subject of vendor preservation. Yet, up until recently, most of the publishers failed to see the problem. But we're starting to see encouraging signs. Not long ago, I had a conversation with Walter Spoorer, who shared with me that one of the district court libraries in the US had asked for a number of their older treatises to be made available in PDF format. They are now working with them and would like to work with other libraries to identify important treatises for retrospective archiving, and tell me that they plan to begin prospective archiving as new editions are published. Access to the archives will not be free, but they assured me that pricing will be, in their words, nominal. Unfortunately, since that initial conversation, they have shared pricing with me, and I don't think our respective understanding of the meaning of the word nominal are in alignment. So yet they do seem eager to work with the library community to work this out. Similarly, at AALL this summer, I helped to facilitate a hot topic session on this problem for the first time, the vendors seem to understand what is at issue. I believe most of this new understanding is due to court and firm libraries who are now experiencing citation problems. At the same conference, during another program called the Future of Collections, a firm librarian brought the problem of citation and preservation up. Awareness is slowly building, and it's exciting to learn that the publishers are beginning to grasp the problem, but we as librarians need to be at the table as they work on a solution. I hope you will join us. And with that, I will now turn my time over to Becky and Elizabeth, who will talk about discovery. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. So Becky and I are going to be talking about discovery. So discoverability is part of the big three of PDA because it can determine how successful a library's catalog will be in getting its content to its patrons. If our patrons aren't going to use something that they can't find. A potential scenario is that we buy our content, whether it's a collection or a database, or maybe it's a curated group of ebooks, and our patrons don't use them because they don't know we even bought it. So then when renewal season or stat season comes along and we check those numbers and we realize how much money we've spent on something that didn't get used nearly enough, it could go in the chopping block. But it's really not just about finding the content. It's also about having the good metadata that describes that content itself. Quality metadata, including things like subject descriptors, it's what enables a library to more directly meet the needs of its users. So essentially the problem is that our patrons can't use serendipity to find electronic things as easily as they can when browsing the physical stacks. So one of our patrons can go to the bankruptcy section up in the stacks and they can I Spy all of the bankruptcy materials together. But the only way for our patrons to know about electronic content is through the catalog, or maybe they've made friends with you, their local friendly librarian. Without discoverability, electronic content, it's essentially invisible. And some of the packages that we're buying, they can contain hundreds, if not hundreds of titles. And the sheer volume and scale of these resource collections, they really do make it impossible to catalog them individually at the title level. We would absolutely never finish. So we think that law libraries, vendors, and publishers all need to value the comprehensive discovery of these electronic resources, as well as the quality of what's discoverable. We're in this relationship with the vendors where they provide the content, we organize and curate it to suit our individual patron base, and then our patrons find it and use it. And so if our patrons can't find what we've just spent all this time and money on, then we're not going to buy their content anymore. This good quality data really is a win-win for everyone. So obviously, we're not going to have all the answers for everybody's individual library, but what we have is organized a list of questions to consider. So first, when it comes to the discoverability of databases, we think there are a couple things to think about. The first is, what is the browsability? What are your options? Can you browse by title, by subject? Can you search by keywords or authors? Do you have any filtering or faceting functionalities? What kind of identifying information is included in what you've bought? Do you get volume and date coverage, as well as maybe when the title was last updated? What does the indexing look like? Is it user-friendly? Is it adequate? What is the usability of the platform? Is it going to take a lot of your staff time or user training to get everyone up to speed to how to use the thing you just bought? So think about databases much like you would think about MARC records, but it's just on a more global scale. So now Becky's going to walk us through the MARC record side of things.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So sometimes the importance of MARC records can be overlooked by non-catalogers and non-metadata experts in libraries. Discovery of a library's electronic collections should be both at the database level as well as the title level when possible. Using MARC records to describe the content of our resources can directly and positively impact their discoverability by providing more access points. There are several types and sources for records, and you may be faced with choosing from multiple options. There are pros and cons to any of the options, which must be weighed carefully against staff time, budgetary constraints, and giving the resource its best chance of discoverability. When obtaining MARC records and other forms of metadata, we suggest that you consider the following. Firstly, how do you know if the MARC records are good? Having preferred minimum data point requirements within MARC records, such as a complete title, alternative titles, full author names, the publisher or governing body, the publication date, ISSN or ISBN if they exist, and at least 1 or 2 subject headings. Vendor-supplied MARC records vary in quality, but may provide the best coverage of titles that are included in a timely fashion. When vendors are unable to provide their own MARC records, they may outsource to third-party cataloging services. Can your library afford potential costs associated with MARC records if there are no free options? When deciding whether to go with free or records at a cost, taking into consideration the difference in quality is especially important. Often records with a cost associated are far superior. So when investing in an expensive resource, or if a particular resource is determined to be at the core of your collection, providing the best metadata will also often provide the best findability, which is what you want. When there are no other options available, some libraries may also choose to manually copy catalog or originally catalog MARC records into their system, though this requires specialized skills and a lot of staff time. Secondly, does your library have the appropriate level of staffing with necessary skills and knowledge, such as a dedicated cataloger or metadata specialist? Another staffing related consideration is whether or not your library can handle any technological requirements related to loading metadata into your library's catalog. You'll want to research different delivery options for those MARC records. Is there a way to automate their import into your system to save staff time, such as FTP delivery? Does someone need to manually obtain the record files from a website or via an email? Or will you need to manually create or manipulate data to get it into your system? There are also some alternatives to MARC record sets. Many library systems contain knowledge-based records. Overall quality as well as coverage can often be questionable, especially with resources that are so specialized like law collections. When there are no other alternatives or affordable options, this is certainly better than nothing, since it will provide at least some title level discovery. Some vendors also offer KBART files, which are vendor supplied title lists, which contain core metadata such as the URL, title, ISBN or ISSN, and coverage information. Sometimes this can be used to provide links at the title level within your system without full catalog records. Lastly, unified indexes within library and discovery systems can provide coverage dates and holdings, as well as article or chapter level linking when they are available, which can also increase the discoverability. All the options we have mentioned allow us to aid in the best discoverability possible for our resources. Each option has its own cost, whether that be in money, staff time, or quality. In addition to deciding the factors we listed, AALL's Vendor Supplied Records Advisory Group, or VRAG, has been maintaining a comprehensive spreadsheet of all MARC record sources and options for almost all legal resources. This document is in the process of being significantly updated, but I encourage you to utilize this updated resource once available. Both VRAG's website as well as the KBART FAQs are linked within the PDA Toolkit document. I would now like to turn it over to EJ to talk about accessibility.
Hi. Okay, so one of the things that we need to consider when we're making purchasing decisions is whether what we license is actually accessible to all our users. This means users with disabilities, particularly print disabilities. So that includes probably what first jumps to mind, which is people who are blind and using screen readers, but also actually a much larger population of users with mobility issues, low vision, color blindness, cognitive disabilities like dyslexia or ADHD, seizure disorders, and just a number of others. So users with disabilities are the largest minority group in the United States, and I promise these issues are affecting your patrons. The ethical responsibility of providing equitable services should really be enough to make this a priority, but there's also possible legal ramifications if we don't. The Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 508 are important to keep in mind. Most of us haven't been trained in how to determine if a database we want to license is accessible, so often we're relying on vendor-provided information. Now, typically this comes in the form of a voluntary product accessibility template or a VPAT. These are most often prepared by the vendors, and any vendor doing business with the government has almost certainly been required to put one together. More often than not, however, the information in VPATs is not completely accurate. In a December 2020 study published in the Information Technology and Libraries Journal, assessing the accuracy of VPATs, of the 227 databases analyzed, only 10 were found to fully match the claims that the vendor made. 35% failed 2 or more tested criteria completely. Another 35% had no VPAT at all. Looking at this from a purely information literacy standpoint, these are just not the most credible sources. So what can we do about this? Scott and I came up with 3 recommendations. First, We need information that we can rely on to make these decisions. To do that, these VPATs really ought to be prepared by a third party. Information you're getting from a sales team is necessarily going to be aimed at selling the product. A third-party audit is good for us because it allows us to trust the information we're getting, and it's good for the vendor because it allows them to fix problems they might otherwise not even know about. We provided some links in the toolkit to third parties that do these kinds of audits. We're also working on a project here at Harvard that we're hoping will help to provide a third-party alternative to VPATs, which we can talk about more in the breakout room. So second, any contract we sign for a licensed product should contain language that requires the vendor to meet appropriate accessibility guidelines. Not only that, but it should contain specific language about whose responsibility it is to fix the problem and how much time they have to do it. So it's an old statistic now, but back from 2012, but I haven't found a newer one. And it states that the average time between the introduction of a new information technology and the availability of a version that's accessible to persons with disabilities is 3 years. So assuming this hasn't changed substantially, a first-year student encountering a problem would likely have graduated before it's fixed. We need contract provisions that allow us to do better than that. Again, the toolkit has links to some suggested contract language. We're not recommending any of these in particular, just offering some examples of what others have done. So finally, we should secure a specific contact with every vendor who knows about using their product, assistive technology, and can answer questions in an informed way. The benefits of this is that when you run into a problem, you know who to call. And when you call them, they know what you're talking about. I know this sounds really basic and obvious, but when a librarian has a patron in their office who's having problems now, you don't want to fumble around with basic customer service folks who, at least in my experience, typically aren't well-versed in this information. So quickly, in summary, I'd want to check the following boxes: third-party audit of vendor products, strong accessibility related language and contracts, and a good vendor contact you can call if things go wrong. All right, and I think that brings us to the breakout rooms.
All right, before we actually go into the breakout rooms, I want to mention this one thing, that if some of you have to leave, that's fine. We're still gonna reconvene, but I do want to put in the print to electronic standing committee's email. So this goes to all members of the committee, and if there's any information you'd like to share about your experiences or other problems that you have encountered that haven't been addressed by our speakers today, please do not hesitate to send an email to us.
All right, so I will start the breakout rooms. You'll have the option to choose which one you want to go into. And just to check in with the presenters, did you just want a 10-minute countdown set on that? Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Are we back?
Everyone's back. Everyone's back in now.
All right, so I hope we all had fruitful discussions in the breakout rooms, and I hope this isn't the end of these discussions. And I want to sort of talk a little bit about the follow-up. I introduced this based on the fact that NELCO put together this working group to create the PDA toolkit. As a result of the PDA working group's efforts and based on recommendations of the NELCO ad hoc print to electronic committee, NELCO created a print to electronic standing committee, and that committee is charged with implementing the approved recommendations made by the print to electronic committee, the ad hoc one. It will create opportunities to engage with vendors on issues related to preservation, discoverability, and accessibility of digital legal materials, to study the state of digital legal publishing, and to publish materials related to print to electronic format changes. The committee will also create and oversee a communications plan, including a speakers bureau, for which you're participating with today, to educate librarians, judges, and the bar on the PDA toolkit and other matters related to digital legal materials, and create materials for speaker to use as part of their presentation. So if you have an interest in spreading the news of PDA, please do not hesitate to contact the print to electronic standing committee, and I'm going to once again put in our email. And I also want to say that the committee is currently in the process of collecting data for a white paper on the issue of preservation itself. So our first step in our data collection is to determine what types of issues libraries have been experienced as a result of electronic publishing practices. So we ask that you have anything to share about preservation issues, however small it may seem to you. Please again email the committee. In the preservation breakout room, there was some interesting information, and I think if we can share that, that would help the committee a lot in our work. So at this point, I just figured I would thank all of our speakers, but also open up the floor for any questions or comments that have arisen as a result of the presentation, the breakout rooms, or anything else.
I have a question to start, maybe while people are thinking about it. Obviously, your group is composed of representatives from American libraries, and here we have our healthy Canadian audience. Do you have any thoughts on how we can partner internationally, or any particular opportunities that you see there?
So I'll speak to that. So the committee actually had a meeting this morning, and Kim Nair, who's a member of CALL, was there. Hi, Kim. We did discuss in sort of creating avenues for surveying librarians. To what extent do we want to capture? Just like U.S. librarians, or do we want to go to Canada? Do you want to go to the UK and Australia? And so I think we're open in the data collection for our neighbors to the north and their concerns. I think if you find that you're sharing similar issues and you really want this sort of information to spread in the Canadian law library community, part of the goal is we have these great speakers who've done really great work with the PDA working group, but we can't sort of do it. We can't rely on them to do everything. So if you're interested in actually being a speaker and speaking on these topics, please email us as well, and we can provide you. What we do is essentially provide you with some material and tips on what to convey and whatnot. But this is not just a NELCO project. We're getting the conversation started, but it's really something for all of us.
Kim, go ahead if you have anything to add or a different question.
Kind
And
of
thanks,
just,
David.
yeah, just on that point and to David's earlier remarks, Katerina Daniels posted a link, and I think that's a good example, and that may be one way that we can also collaborate to move forward, is sharing examples of initiatives that you know about or success stories that you may have had with a vendor. The parent companies of many of the Canadian and American vendors are the same, and they're they don't always work closely together, but there still may be some ways to take advantage of a successful project in one country and move that forward. And I just was, if Katerina's still here, she's willing to speak a little bit about that. I thought that was really interesting and surprising, but amazing from the sounds of what she posted.
Hi, yes, I'm still here. Sorry if there's a little bit of background noise. But essentially, from what I know, I don't work at the CAGE, I don't represent them. I just work with them very closely. But yeah, they have an agreement with Wilson Lafleur, which is one of the major publishers here, and we get tons of their ebooks available like pretty much as soon as they're published. Frankly, they get published open for the world to access on their ebook platform, and they've been saving their previous editions. So it's been really, really great. And someone asked me also about how if I can like sync our catalogs. The CAGE also offers that service, but that's probably irrelevant to you all. But they have a nice service where they actually can link up all of their holdings with your individual library holdings, so that everything comes through. Wilson Lafleur is not, no, it's separate. They're the big competitors to Carswell, which is Yvon Blais is the Carswell Thomson Reuters World. Yeah, so they're the big competitors to the two. And yes, I can drop my email in the chat. Sorry.
Thanks for sharing that. That's fantastic. Did anyone else either have anything to add to that point or any other questions for our presenters? I see Lucy has a hand up.
Yeah, hi there. I'm calling in from Auckland, New Zealand. I'm also I'm a law librarian at a barristers' chambers, very small one, certainly in international standards, but I'm also on the New Zealand Law Librarians Association. We are having discussions very deeply at the moment with Thomson Reuters, who have recently updated their Westlaw platform in New Zealand. And one of the problems with it is that pretty much all the ebooks that we had previous, or books as electronic versions that we had previously, have been not quite disappeared, but have been chopped up into what they now call an A to Z of New Zealand law. And as librarians, we sort of came to them and said, well, hang on a second, people want to be able to search by text. These are the legal treatises that people rely on, and they can't find them because the content has been sort of chopped into parts. So they've been very slow to recognize even what the problem is. And yes, but I've been finding it's very interesting looking at that whole issue of preserving previous editions. And that's something that we're going to have to confront as well. So certainly from an international perspective, we'd be interested in being part of the conversation too.
David and I were in a meeting earlier this morning talking about this, and it sort of led to even larger discussion about the loss of for sale, and that definitely is an international issue. I think other countries are better than the US in terms of updating their copyright law. I don't know if anybody has anything to share about that, but I do see this as a worldwide concern. Kim?
Just to Carolyn's point, there was an article, I think it's a 2016 article by Professor Ariel Katz of University of Toronto. The title is something like Digital Exhaustion, which examines basically the for sale doctrine or the concept of exhaustion in copyright law and how that should apply to the digital realm. I think it's a 2016 article. I don't remember the name of the journal. I could find the citation. There you go. That's it. And I think it resulted in a book chapter later on as well.
Are there any other questions for our presenters today? Or other comments to share with the whole group while we have this big contingent here? Okay. Well, if not, I will call it here then. We have the contact information for our presenters if anything does come up. And yeah, I just want to thank you again so much. It was just as interesting hearing it the second time. They're great reminders, and they are really applicable to a Canadian audience as well. There might be some small specifics that are different, but certainly things that we are discussing here as well, and clearly to a New Zealand audience in addition. So yeah, thank you so much to all the presenters. Thank you to all of the attendees, and we'll certainly continue this conversation going forward.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.